Perfect timing. Yay. Hello, Zoomers.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'm just going to dive right in since we've gotten started a little late, but so in 2024, it was my husband and I's 40th wedding anniversary, and we never do anything like hardly traveling much of anything. So we decided we wanted to do something really big for the 40th, right? And so we couldn't decide where we wanted to go, but what we were thinking we had watched a few years ago, we watched Doc Martin and we loved Cornwall and thought we should go there. And then it sounds like we watch all kinds of television. I guess we do. Then I watched Shetland and I loved, that's in Scotland. And so we thought, well, let's just make a UK trip and try to, do like a sampler trip. So we had 2 weeks. I planned the whole thing myself just because a travel agent I talked to said, we don't do any of the things that you want to do because we wanted to do mostly nature things, Airbnbs, not hotels, not big cities. So anyway, it took me about 10 months to plan it. I used friends. I used hours and hours of YouTube videos, reviews, asking people. And then the beauty of that was that in 10 months, by the time I booked everything slowly, then I actually had it paid for by the time we were ready to go. So that part was nice too. And when I would get really nervous, because, if I've never been anywhere, I get ready to plunk down, money on, Airbnb thousands of miles away. My son, who's done a lot of traveling in non-English speaking countries, would say, Mom, they all speak English over there.
Jordan.
And they're used to travelers, so you're going to be fine. So we were fine. So anyway, so this is just a little sampler. So our first stop was in Aberdeen. We needed to fly into Aberdeen, Scotland, because we were going to take the Northlink ferry up to the Shetland Islands. So we thought we'd just stay a couple days in Aberdeen. So this is where we stayed. It was called the Old Fitty Coal Shed, and it was in just an adorable 1800s fishing village called Foot Dee, which is at the foot of the River Dee. It's at the North Sea and the River Dee come together. And it's a little town that was a fishing village. It's all set up with little quirky little buildings and stuff. And this was really just an adorable place. She was probably the best of all the Airbnbs we stayed. She had lots of goodies, and she even had the scotch that was made in Aberdeen, Scotland, with lemons and sugar for hot toddies. And it was just, she was wonderful. So that was the Old Fitty Coal Shed. I know, I liked that too. I thought that was really, I should have asked her if that was what she believed in, but it was lovely. It was very lovely. Then when we got there, right away, we left, it was 85 degrees when we left St. Louis. We got there, it was probably about 40. So of course we dressed properly, but it was cold and very windy and gray, because I think it's always gray. But anyway, it's okay. So we started walking along the beach area. And the first thing I was struck by is the fact that, I'll show you the beach in a minute, but these people, they live like right on the, right off of the beach. I'm like, what an incredible place to live. And then they hang their laundry out, and it is incredibly windy. So I can't even imagine that these were even on the line an hour afterwards, but I know they know what they're doing. But anyway, I kind of liked that. Yes, that's the old original lighthouse for Foot Dee. That was their original lighthouse, which is really kind of small. It's really not very big.
What year was this?
It was mid-October. So October 12th, the 13th, we got there. So this is what's like that house, is over there. So this is the beach that they get to look out on every day when they hang their laundry out to dry. So in the background is the main building for the ships that come and navigate, all the workers that work there for the ships that navigate there. It's a working port. Aberdeen, the Foot Dee is a working port. And so here's what you're looking at as you look down around the beach. So it's there's shops, there's food trucks, all the amusements are there. And then I tried to look up a few things, like those things that are jutting out into the ocean. And some of you may know this because you're more well-traveled than I am, but those work to create a stronger beach through help holding erosion back and doing all things. And they're called loins. I think they're called groins. So that's that.
Rocky, I'm sure it takes a lot to overcome it.
Yeah, right. So it is very rocky. So this is another view of the beach, and here are two new lighthouses. So the one on the far right, and then the one to the left of the ship coming in. Those are the two newer lighthouses that are against the seawall. And then there's a ship that's coming in. So a quick little fact about Aberdeen. It used to be just kind of a nondescript little city. And then after they started mining oil, it became like now it's considered the oil capital of Europe. And even though it's a small kind of, smallish city, they say that like the number of millionaires like per capita or whatever is like really huge because now they're all rich. So a lot of them are rich. I have the Canon R6. And I took that and I took every lens I own. So, so this is, if this one is probably the 100 to 400 that I have. Yeah, it's that one. It's not the 24 to 105 I use a lot. And then the 100 to 400. Then I did, thanks to my sweet sister-in-law, Diana, I did take my big, because I said I wasn't going to take it. She's like, you have to take the big lens. So actually I was glad that I did, because I did haul it up to some cliff walks and I was able to get some shots. So yeah, it's the 200 to 800. So I took that with me. So.
That is quite the hiking companion.
Yes, it is quite the hiking companion. So I had to get I got a new bag from Schiller's. Actually, I think it's the camera bag that Yvonne has, but I got one that's a little bit bigger, a think tank bag that actually had, you can remove all the things, and it was big enough to hold all my lenses and my camera. Is that why I brought it? I carried it most of the time, but you're right. He was pretty good about it. So I did after we chose not to drive just because we were terrified of driving on the other side of the road and the other side of the car. So we walked. I put probably 20,000 to 25,000 steps on my Fitbit every day, which was good. It was nice and healthy. But there were a few days carrying that backpack that I asked if you would help carry it. So, but anyway, so that's the ocean there. So here's one of the ships that are coming into it's a very narrow harbor. And this little thing is called, the little boat is called the Sea Shepherd. And so it's helped guide this big, huge boat into the harbor. And there's the Sea Shepherd again. And then you can see there's all the scenic oil tankers, which were tanks and stuff. But anyway, that's what
Have you printed that on metallic?
Have I? No, but would it look good on metallic, you think?
I think it would look amazing. I could be wrong.
No, you'd be right. I would try it. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I kind of like it, even though it's not very naturey, but I do like it. So this is the town. It's set up in a grid. So it's got these little walkways that go all throughout it, and it's set up in like 2 grids, and all the houses, they all face each other. And then the backs are all, kind of together. And that's because of the storms, being on the ocean, the wind and everything. But they're really, as you can see, really quirky little houses, little cottages. This is pedestrian. Yes, this is pedestrian only. This is a walkway. And what our Airbnb owner, even though she is an Airbnb owner, she did tell me that, in the 1800s, of course, these are all fishermen cottages. But over time, as fishing was less important and oil took over, then now most of these are owned either by vacationing Europeans or from other countries that come and stay there, or Airbnb owners. So even though, I was staying there as a guest, a foreign person, they were saying that I think some people were kind of sad that it's kind of lost that community feeling, but I was grateful to be there. So anyway, it's a cute little place.
I'm sorry, what town was that?
This is called Foot D in Scotland. It's on the outskirts of Aberdeen. of Aberdeen, Scotland. So it's called Foot Deer. They call it Fitty. The locals call it Fitty. And here's another little cottage that with all its the little.
They always have things, I mean, they decorate your yards like that.
Oh, neat. Can you hear that on Zoom? Can you hear, did you hear Cindy? She said
No,
it.
not really.
Okay, she was just saying it looked like San Jose.
Santa Fe.
I mean, Santa Fe, sorry. Santa Fe with the stucco and all the things stuck all over the place. No, that's their house. It's not a store. No, they just put a lot of tchotchkes out. Yeah, tchotchkes. So that was that. So then this is, we decided we were gonna walk to, so on my times of researching, there were things that I check off that I wanted to see, obviously. One of the things I wanted to see was one of the oldest bridges in Scotland is in Aberdeen. And so we decided we were gonna walk to it. It's Balgony was the name of it. So we started walking and I don't know how far we walked. It was really, really far. But it was okay. We were walking. So this was just a neat little house that was on the way to the bridge. So isn't it? I know, everything is so, I think one of the things that I really wanted to see by going to the UK and Ireland was I had never been to a place that was older than my whole country. And I was really, really excited to see that. And then when you're immersed in things that are built in the 1300s and, then we get up to Shetland and it's, the Iron Age. It just really, I don't know, gives you pause for, thinking about the world. So everything here was old too. So this was the bridge. After walking, this very kind of a plain little bridge, but unfortunately, a lot of the stuff was closed. I couldn't get anything better than this shot. I wanted to get down into the water like we all would have done. But it was closed off. So this is the bridge. It was built in 1300. It's a foot bridge. Balgony is the name of it. So it was lovely. I mean, the setting is really lovely that you really can't see much of the setting, but yeah, I don't know. So then this is on the bridge, ready to walk across it. So it was pretty. It was the fall, so it was kind of pretty. So that was it for the bridge. I got just 2 shots and so then we were going back and we realized we've got to take a bus because I was logging the lenses. I'm like, so we did navigate the bus system. It was fine. It was good. So this is just, you can't hardly see it because it's kind of whited out there, but it was a full moon that night. And so we walked through the town to go to the restaurant and just got some rooftops, granite and slate. That's what all the back in Fitty again. That's what all those are made. Whoops, all those are made of, sorry. So this is the beach at night. And what I thought was really cool about it is this is one of the little streets of the cottages and the backs of the houses are actually built into the seawall. The seawall, which I thought that was really, really interesting. So, and living in the Midwest, I have no idea what a storm looks like at sea. I have no idea. So they have some pretty rugged weather there, is what yeah, there's a Ferris wheel that's along the beach. So up that way is the walkway, it's kind of like, yeah, I guess you'd call it a boardwalk. Yeah, so that was at night. This is probably I think this is the last shot that I took there. After we finished the restaurant. This is the river actually. So you've got the sea and then you've got the river. This is the Foot D river, the river D. And it was just looking across at some of the houses. So with that was the end of our visit to Aberdeen and to Fitty. So then we took the overnight ferry up to the Shetland Islands. And in my mind, when I booked this overnight ferry, I'm thinking I'm going to be on the top deck, and I'm going to be shooting like the whole time, all through the night and everything. I was so excited. And we get on that ferry and they were like, nope, nobody goes on the top deck because it was going to be, not stormy, but it was a little windy. So I got no shots of the ferry, I got one of the boat, but anyway. So, oh well, but anyway, it was a very interesting trip. It was, it looks like a mini cruise ship, you know, so you're thinking, oh, it's gonna be like a cruise ship, and they had a nice dining room and a bar, you know, and we got dinner with our ticket and everything, and we got dinner and we were literally like going, you know, trying to get to our place to sit. And it was so funny because when we went on our tour later, our tour guide up in the Shetland Islands, he said, "You guys took the ferry?" And we're like, "Yeah, why?" He's like, "Wow." Like he was really impressed. So I don't know. Maybe I didn't read the reviews enough, but I think if I ever did it again, I would fly from Aberdeen to Shetland. I don't know that I'd take.
That's what most people do.
Is it? Thank you, Holly.
Yes, yes, because the seas are so rough
But
and
you
they're
gotta
very
take it once.
temperamental.
Yeah, you got to take it once, but you're right. You're right. I would fly again. It's about an 8.5 hour. It's overnight. So they'll leave about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And then you have, like, I rented a berth or whatever they call it with beds and, you know, and then I also rented another thing. Anyway, you didn't get a lot of sleep because then it stops in Orkney on the way up, which we didn't know. And right outside we had a window and everything. People are, the boat stops, they're clanging the chains, the people are getting off. So I'm like, okay, we're not doing that ever again. But anyway, we did have the experience. So we ended up in the town of Lerwick, Scotland, which is on the mainland. So Shetland is, they call it an archipelago of about 100 islands. About 20 of them are inhabited. The mainland Shetland is the largest island, and Lerwick is the largest city on the largest island. So we were in this is just at the back of our apartment, but this is the neighborhood where we stayed in, which is so cute. Yeah, so this was probably the nicest place we stayed. It was a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment. I could have lived there. I mean, it was a kitchen and a lovely neighborhood. It was really, really great. So that was a cute little neighborhood. And in Lerwick. So this, I thought it was weird just because the seagulls, you know, are everywhere. But this guy was standing there and I thought he looked like part of the statue, right? He's like this, you know, so he was part of the statue. So what we did next was I had, Shetland.org is if you ever want to go to Shetland, is an incredible website. It has everything, the places to stay, the places to eat. It was a great resource. So there was a company called Shetland Nature that was on there, and they're all like naturalists and they're all photographers. So I was like, that's who I'm gonna be with. So we ended up booking a tour with a guy named James, who was incredible, so incredibly knowledgeable about the wildlife and everything. And then he's a great photographer. So it was really fun. So if you're, you know, for me, I'd never been on a photography trip like a safari or anything. So I wanted to build my own photography trip into this, which my husband was very nice about letting me shoot for 2 weeks every day. You know, I was like, I'm taking my camera everywhere. So this was on the tour with James. This is a mussel farm. So just the mussels, they hook them on there and then they're in mussel beds. They grow over time and then eventually they're harvested. So, and again, in true Shetland fashion, it was gray and cloudy most of the time, but it was okay. It's kind of pretty. Then the other, Yvonne can tell you about how many sheep there are in Scotland. And she was right. So there are a lot of sheep there. James was telling us that things are changing somewhat. Some of the things that they've done for their livelihood forever, which was sheep, there's not as much of a market. So they're kind of trying to decide what they're going to do. But
And those sheep are the ones that Peggy has at Wildflower Farm. She has the Shetland sheep.
I remember that, Holly. That was so neat. It was really, I was so happy to have gone on that trip with you guys before we went, because I felt like I knew, you know, and then later on we see the Highland coos, which I'm like, I know what those are. So yeah. So yes, I do think tech has become really big, Cindy. That's what we heard too, that things were changing. And it's interesting because I get a lot of emails from a lot of places now that I've, you know, done all this, looked at all their sites. And I'm always getting things about, move to Shetland. So I think they're losing some of their population as well. And they're really worried about having enough people to maintain the islands. So they're always wanting, people to move there. I don't think they want my husband and I, who are old, though. They probably want young people, but so those were the sheep. This was just incredibly cool. So we're driving along and James said, I'm going to take you past this old croft house that I think is really cool. I'm like, okay. So he drives up and I have a couple more pictures I can show you what what you see if you would live in there. But so he stopped the car and I said, well, can we go down there? And he's like, well, do you want to? I'm like, yes, yes. How close can we get? So anyway, we went down there. So he was explaining to us about the croft system, that they either can be tenant farmers or they can, in some cases, they can own the land, they can rent from the crofting commission, all that kind of thing. But he said these buildings are so old that rather than rehab them, which would be kind of not very smart financially, that they just let them, disintegrate and then they'll go to another part of the croft and they'll build a new house. So this one, I'll go down to a little, so this is the house. This is what you're looking at. So I said, okay, in the US, that maybe not this house, but a house with this kind of a view would be how much, like a fortune. And I said, like here, if it was for sale, and he said, oh, it just really wouldn't be that much, probably just like a couple 100,000 or something. And I said, what? He said, because there just aren't that many people. It's very remote. So I insisted, hey, get a hold of me if they ever want to sell it. Yes.
Cabin on the lake, very similar to that actually, and it was like 220,000.
So there are places in the US like that.
Yeah.
That would be nice. That would be. Right. That's right. That's for sure. So this is the last, though not the last picture. So there's the door. So the side of it was pretty much fallen in. So we were just looking inside and I thought the door was kind of cool that we were looking at. And then the last picture, the house is over there. So this is what they look out on what they did in that house. Yeah, I know. It was just amazing. So interestingly enough, does anybody watch Shetland, the show on BritBox? Okay. So the latest season started a few weeks ago and it has a new introduction with, pictures and video and stuff. And my husband and I are watching it and that very house is on there. And I stood up, I'm like, I have that shot. I have it, a very shot. So that was pretty exciting. So anyway, that's the thing. So the next place he took us was a little inlet, a little bay, a little inlet. And there were seals and these are common seals. And so he said, oh, we just had some orcas the other day that had come and I know we didn't see them, but he said, but they really come in and they like to pick off the seals. And I'm like, no, I don't want to see it. So anyway, there were no orcas, but there were lots of seals. So I know. And it was, well, I had the big one on for that. I had the 200 to 800, yeah, on for that one. So the interesting thing was, it was really just my husband, Rick, James, and I. I mean, most of the time, there's just nobody around in the fall. The fall is their slow season. So I'm sure there'd be people around in the summer. But we brought lunches and we literally just sat and the seals were so curious about us. I mean, they watched us as much as we watched them. So, and my husband thinks they look like big dogs because their faces look like dogs. So
Were you told about the Selkie legend?
no, what's that?
Well, you're lucky you didn't get drowned by one of them, turning into a handsome man or woman.
Really?
Yeah.
By the
Look up the
seal?
Selkie.
Oh,
Selkie.
I'm going to look that up. The Selkie legend she's talking about. Thank you. That's exciting. So this guy came in really pretty close and was watching us. And then when we were driving away, this was the area where the seals were, which was really pretty. And again, solid socked in fog, but hey, the sun peeked out for just a little bit. The next place we stopped was St. Ninian's Isle. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but it is it is called a tide island. And so where we're standing there is the island, and it's tied to the mainland, which is over there by this strip of sand called a tombolo. And a tombolo, this is like one of the best examples of the tombolo in the UK. A tombolo is a strip of shell sand that gets created over time because there are two bodies of water on either side that are, the waves are lapping and leaving shells and sand, and over time it creates. So this is a permanent structure. It's not one that washes away. It's always there. Sometimes they said I believe in the winter time, if the tide is really high, it might be mostly covered, but it's always there. So that is a tombolo. And then when we crossed over to the St. Ninian's Isle, so we went up to this church that was, I think it was, I'm terrible at remembering numbers. Okay, so it's a 12th, the remains of a 12th century church. And then the interesting thing is in 1958, there was an archaeological dig going on there, and they had a young boy with them who was digging, and he actually found a cask of silver, metals and jewelry and everything, and they determined that that was from the 8th century Vikings. And they found it underneath the 13th century church. I'm like, old, everything's so incredibly old. So it was great. Yeah, that was interesting. And then this is just another shot of St. Ninian's of the tombolo. And then this is the sand, because I think this looks like the buttons on a couch, doesn't it? So, when we walked over to the island, I was like, look at those rocks. They look really cool. And this is when, you're not necessarily with all photographers, right? They're walking, and I'm like going, look at these rocks and this and the sand. And they're like way far away from me. So on the way back, I got to shoot I said, I'm stopping here and shooting the rocks in the sand. It's just a bench looking over at the island. It's so pretty. So here is James on the left, my husband on the right. And then he took us to the cliffs. He took us from the mainland. We were kind of sort of in the middle north a little bit. He drove us up to the very northernmost tip, and then we went down to the southernmost tip. So this is when we're at the southernmost tip called Sumberg, and that's where the airport is. And so there are these huge, huge cliffs, and I have a fear of heights. And so this was like the highest I've ever, with all that open space around you. I literally, my knees were feeling weak, and you can see pretty far. I had a long lens on. I was pretty far away, but they're kind of at the edge, and they're like, well, come on. I said, I can't. I think I'm going to faint. I can't go any closer. So it was really cool, but I chose to stand back so thank you from behind them. There's the cliffs. So they were back a little ways on that one that you can see closest to the front. So now you can see why I couldn't get close to.
Did they take that picture for you?
No, I took it. Well, I had the long one. I was standing back pretty far. And again, fog everywhere, fog and rain.
Yeah.
So this is a weird, it's an odd picture, but I kind of like it. So it's probably not, there's a flare there. It's not the best picture, but it was just a strange, it was a strange thing of fog and some clouds, and then that really, really bright sun. So anyway, that's Rick and James and there. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It's crazy. I don't know, you guys have probably been shooting a lot longer than I have, but sometimes, you get your photo in your Lightroom or whatever, and you look at it and you're just like, what is that? I didn't see it exactly like that when it happened, but thank you. Thank you. This was just as we were leaving, just a quaint little manor house with some sheep. And then, okay, so this is the last place that we went to with James. This is called Jarl's Hof. And it's interesting with the respect, it's on a headland that sticks, out into the ocean. And we asked, well, it's a Well, I'm gonna forget, I have to look the name of it. Okay. It's a multi-period settlement. Sorry about that. And that means that over the years, the ocean began to erode away this headland, this point out into the ocean. And what they started discovering is there were many levels of time, different time periods of different ruins. So the newest one is it was a medieval house that was there, and that's the big one at the top. And they said that was like, maybe 1700s, 1800s, something like that. But then down below it, they have found over time, they've found Bronze Age, Iron Age, Neolithic, Viking stuff. So it's really incredible. So I said, well, why do you think they found all this stuff here at the same place? And he said, because this is the first place that you get to when you're at sea. So it's one of the first places if you're out at sea that you would reach if you were sailing back in those days. So, and this is just looking out through the doorway of the medieval, well, it's not a castle, it's just a house. So the next, I I've tried all kinds of, I thought, oh, let's try some HD, let's try some of that. So kind of weird technique, but so then if you haven't watched Shetland, I won't belabor some of this because you would know what it is, but this is a house that their detective inspector lived in, in the show. And it's in this part of the town of where it's called the Lodberries. And it's just the houses that they built into the sea so they could bring up, things that they were delivering and just bring them right up to your house. This is called the Nab. And so we took a cliff walk in Lerwick out to this area that's called the Nab. That's called the horse head of the Nab, which is just a rock that sticks out. Thank you. Yes, it was a cool place. I don't know Photoshop, so I do everything I do in Lightroom, but no, the light was like that. I mean, I probably do my sliders a little bit, but unfortunately, I wish I knew Photoshop better. And then this is October. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I think, I would like to go back a different time of year, but you're right, the light would have been different, but this is just another view from the Nab. The rock walls are really popular. And if you've been to the UK, they're all over the place. That's kind of what they use instead of fencing. No, the ground just depends. No. Yeah, we weren't on too much rocky ground, I don't remember it being, actually some of our trails around here, I think are rockier than where we were. This is a cemetery. This is the Lerwick Cemetery. This is actually the newer part of the cemetery, which starts at World War I. So that's the newer one. Then you get the real ancient ones somewhere else that I didn't go to, but that's their cemetery. Here's just another view of the cemetery, old. And just another view of the ocean with more clouds. Well, always more clouds. So then we finished in Lerwick and then we flew to south to Cornwall. So this is if anybody watch Doc Martin? Yeah, a couple of people. So this is where it was actually filmed. So this is Port Isaac. It was known as Port Wen in the show, but it's actually Port Isaac. So this is where we had wanted to come to. So it was called the Breakstone Cottage. I don't have any shots of the actual cottage. I don't know why I didn't take any, but this was the third floor. It was a 3-story cottage that we rented because it was available, So anyway, we were up on the 3rd floor and I have never seen such narrow stairwells. I mean, it was so, if you've been there, And it was literally like climbing a ladder every night. So, up 2 flights of stairs and then down. Oh, I forgot my this, down. Bathroom was on the second floor. Kitchen was on the first. So we got a lot of exercise. But I loved looking out that window and seeing even more hills above me and the seagulls. I love the seagulls. They're always around. So, so this is Port Isaac. These are the seawalls. This is when the tide is out, obviously, and it's just a lovely place, a really lovely place. This is looking up to, so if you watch Doc Martin, so there's that big house on the top, and immediately down from that is the house that was used for his surgery in his home, that building. They're doing a lot of construction, and then this one right here on the bottom is where Bert Large's restaurant was, if you know the show. And another close-up of the surgery. And I feel badly. I mean, the show, is over with, so I'm hoping things will calm down, but they had a little sign in the window, please, because it's a bed and breakfast now. And they're like, please respect our privacy. I guess in the summer, there's hordes of people and they all go up there and they all take their picture and they all, so I took a picture, but from far away. I tried to respect them. This is a pasty shop, if you know what pasties are. You guys know what pasties? Yeah, they're really yummy. And so my husband and I don't eat meat, so they had some potato ones and some vegetable ones. They were really, really good. And I did find out that they started, so tin mining was really big in Cornwall hundreds of years ago. And they started as a miner's food because you could put sweet on one side and savory on the other, and then you bake them in this pastry. So it's kind of interesting. This is just a fisherman guy. So Cornwall is still a working fishing village. And so they have a fish store and they just bring the fish in every day. And so I like this one because you guys were all at home taking the pictures of the comet and the Milky Way. And this is what I got to see. So I decided to do some slow shutter speed because I'm like, clouds, there's a couple of stars. That's about all you could see. So that's all you can see. So
I think you win.
Oh, thank you. But I did not find the comet nor the Milky Way the whole time I was there. I did, nope. And this is another one at night. I like night stuff, obviously, but this is looking up from up the hill, looking down to the village. That house or the building with the kind of bluish stuff around it is the old schoolhouse in Doc Martin. And now it's a restaurant, a very good restaurant. We ate there, and a hotel. And then while we were there, they had a storm, not where we were, but out at sea. And then it caused the tide to come in like closer than it normally comes in. And so it's so cool how they're right there on, like there's a concrete thing that comes up out of the ocean, and then the house, the restaurants and stuff, they call it the Platte. And that's basically where the fishermen will put their fishermen's stuff, and the fish come in and all that. Well, the tide was going like all the way up to the buildings, and they weren't sweating it. They had these blocks of stuff and they just would clunk it down in the doorway and then go home. I mean, and if it got in the building, they're all adobe and concrete or whatever, they just would hose it out of. I mean, obviously that's what you do when you live like that, but I thought that was pretty cool. So this is a cliff walk that we took in Cornwall. This is my husband, and look, hardly anybody else. So it's a nice walk. This is I looked him up. We saw so many of them all around. A pied wagtail. So that's a male pied wagtail. I'm not much of a bird photographer, but I was on the lookout for birds that might be different. And I saw him. He was kind of cute. So this is on the cliff walk looking across to Port Isaac. And they still had some flowers in October, which was nice. Ooh. And then this is when I hauled my big lens up to the cliff walk, I was able to get the little seagulls, which were nice. across there. This is a hooded crow, which is another interesting bird that I don't see in the US. And then we took another tour in Cornwall, out to a different, because Port Isaac is lovely, but I wanted to get out of Port Isaac and see other things. So we took another tour. Our guide's name was Barry, and he was really wonderful also. So he wasn't a naturalist or anything, but he had been a driver for people at Doc Martin and a driver. So he told us great stories, and he knew I wanted to take pictures. So he said, okay. And he said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to see the moor. I want to go on the moor. And that's all I have in mind. Anything else you could just throw at me. So this was he took us way out, like into the villages, out in the country, and those little, you guys, if you've been there, those tiny little roads where, they have to pull over and negotiate who's going. And I'm just like, we couldn't do that in the US. We'd probably kill each other. There's just no way we could go, who's going? I don't know. Are you going? I don't know. We never do it. But anyway, this was a really old bridge with a little river that ran through it. So Highland Coos. So, so this was just a croft, and then they had their little cows up there. And then this was the one. So Barry, it was kind of drizzly, rainy, of course, right? Then he pulls over the side of the road and he says, get your camera and get out. He said, I've only seen this 2 times on my tours. And I said, what? The cow is in the river. I'm like, okay. So I jumped out, the cow was in the river. So anyway, and he was eating the tree. So I figure who else but photographers would appreciate some cow saliva? So there we go. He was munching the trees. And this is just one more shot of the little river. So it was a very sweet little area. It was a sweet area. So then he took us to the moor, which is where I really wanted to go. I said, I want to see some stone circles because I'm here. So he took us to the Stannon Moor. It's Bodmin Moor. So Bodmin Moor is the moor that, that's huge, that runs throughout the area of Cornwall. This is the Stannon Stone Circle, which is a lesser known stone circle. And it was just the 3 of us out there. So I have to say, maybe it's because I wanted to, but I went and I did feel like an energy. I felt I just had to stand there and feel the ancientness of a stone circle and what that possibly, there's really just theories as to what those stone circles are. They're gathering places, they're maybe burial places, but just to kind of feel that people, for thousands of years have been here. And those stones are, they're small compared to what they used to be. They're worn out. But so then the other thing, there was another thing, get your camera, get out, because there are wild ponies on the moor. So there's the moorland ponies. And Holly, I'm so glad you're on, because one of the ponies started coming towards me, and I training from Holly, and I'm like, no, because I remember Holly with the horses, no. So this is a young one. This is a young one, but the next one is the one she looks.
Oh, she's pretty. She's pregnant.
Thank you, Holly. I thought so. I thought she was
Yeah.
pregnant. She looked pregnant, but she comes out from behind some scrubby stuff, and she's just slowly walking towards me, and I'm like, well, obviously she's not that wild, but I'm not gonna, not gonna add to her situation. So I do have a long lens on, so I wasn't that close to her. So anyway, I said no a couple of times, and she kept coming, so I just got in the car. And I said, okay, we're done with the horses. But then their wild horses are a little different, because even though they're wild, they said the tenant farmers, I guess they own them. So I guess they kind of look after them somewhat, but they're still considered wild. But she
Yeah,
wasn't that.
did you see many fences? Because the animals aren't fenced in, they just roam.
Right. Yeah, there were no fences. You're right. Yeah, so this was another this is Trethevy Coit is the name of it. It is a burial chamber. And each one of those slabs is about 10 tons. So there's always this question, how did they do that? How'd they put it together? And then there's a hole at the top. They said it's like drilled through. Well, how did they do that? So I don't know. But it was kind of, it's a portal dolmen, and I think it's one of only like less than 20 of them in the world that are like that. So it's incredibly old also, but they've the other interesting thing about some of these areas too is in the US, like you feel like everything's kind of excavated, everything's kind of done. And they're like, there's all these places. So will that on Shetland? Well, I don't know. There's a really cute museum, and they'd say, there's much more to be found, much more that because nobody's up there, nobody's doing it, which I think is kind of interesting. This is a second stone circle. This is a more well-known stone circle called the Hurlers Stone Circle. It's actually 3 stone circles that are together. And so that was there were a few other people. That was a cool place. And then the back, that structure is called, or that formation is called the cheese ring. And it's just these huge flat stones that just because of erosion are stacked on top of each other. So yeah, it was really an interesting area. And then this is on the same, this is all on the Bodmin Moor. This was an engine house of a tin mine. So I told you tin mining was really big. And then it's not any longer. But this was a steam engine would be in there, and it would be pumping the ore up to the surface. And there's a little pony over there. I see one little pony. But and now they just, they leave them because they think they're kind of the quintessential Cornish look of the moor, are these engine houses, which are kind of cool. So after that, we left the moor. And so Barry, our guide, he said, so are you stone circled out now? And I said, I think I've had a good introduction to stone circles. So he took us to Charlestown, England, which is, it's still an active port. It's also the scene of, or the place where a lot of Doctor Who was shot here. And there's a lot of places. It's a very picturesque harbor. But in September, there was a really bad storm that came through that messed up their lock gate to the harbor. So they actually had to empty out the harbor, which you can see it's empty. And they were doing a lot of repairs when we were there. So it's home to a lot of the tall ships that you see. Yeah, it's kind of a cool place. So this was a black and white shot that I got of the tall ships. It was kind of a cool area. And then tell me who this looks like.
Johnny.
Yeah, don't you think so? Looks like Johnny Depp. I don't know if it was. I don't think it was, but I know, well, maybe it was. But he was up on a box taking pictures, so I just took a picture of him because I think it looked like Johnny Depp. My friend, on this, I'm like, don't look up. I'm like, but we as photographers, of course we look up, even if we get pooped on. So this was the last picture before we left Cornwall. And it was the first time I'd seen boats actually in the water for the few days. That was the last day of Cornwall. This was our final place. So we went to Howth, which is a peninsula part of Dublin, the outskirts of Dublin. And this was a way different place we stayed than anything else we'd stayed. So this was the Harbor Bar, and we stayed above the Harbor Bar. So I have a couple of pictures. There it is, the Harbor Bar. Actually, it was great. It was a great place. It doesn't necessarily, it looks kind of crazy. There it is from down the street. But the owner was incredible, really, really nice guy. And it was just a really fun place to stay. This was right outside of where we stayed. This is St. Mary's old church, and you can look out to the harbor after that. So so my husband also turned 65 while we were there, and so he had said he had wanted to spend his birthday at the Guinness Storehouse in Dublin. So that's where we are right there. Well, that's not us, but we're looking. So we went to Dublin for his birthday, and we had a Guinness, and no.
Bite your tongue. Bite your tongue.
I'm sorry. It was so bitter. Anyway, he drank mine too. So that was okay. But it was fun because Dublin, when you've been in the country, the whole couple of weeks we were gone, then it was really fun to be, in the city and see whole different stuff. We just did not have very much time, unfortunately, to see Trinity College and all the really cool stuff. So we'll have to go back. But this was just inside of Guinness, the very interactive. Those are the bubbles of Guinness. And then this is just taking a walk. So another thing I had wanted to see was I had on all my looking up things, I had seen the Samuel Beckett Bridge, which is the one that looks like the harp. So I told Rick, we can go anywhere you want, but at nightfall, we've got to be at the Samuel Beckett Bridge because that's the shot that I want to get. So we walked around and I just, it's like here too, the old and the new, the blending is always really fun to see. And it was so crowded that it was just really fun. You're arm in arm with people and, they're speaking
It's
all
not the Samuel Beckett
all the
Bridge.
different languages. And it was, it's just a very exciting and fun place to be. Just a random skyscraper. This is the Temple Bar. So all the videos I watch were like, don't go to the Temple Bar area unless you're in your 20s and, stuff. And I'm like, I have to at least see it. I don't care if I have a drink there. So, and that was the only place that we heard traditional Irish music. We had been looking for traditional music the whole trip. And all we heard were 70s American pop the whole time. I'm like, are you kidding me? So obviously we didn't look in the right place. Is I know. Is that what it's like normally? I'm like, where are the fiddlers? Yes, there were some in Dublin. Yeah. I mean, interestingly enough, because we wanted to stay in Airbnbs, that let us be in with the local people, which is what we wanted to do. So we would go to the markets, their local markets, and buy our breakfast and stuff to cook.
And she said, it was one called there's a restaurant called the Big Fat American.
Oh my gosh. Yikes. We didn't see any of that. In fact, on Lerwick, they told us that they don't even allow a larger grocery store in every town because they have the little corner markets and that's what they shop. And so I said, so there'd never be a Walmart here. They're like, oh my God, no. So yeah, are those like a larger grocery? They'd be like every few towns. Yeah. So, but this is Dublin. So I had everything, obviously. This was Christmas. This was October 24th. And Christmas was up. Only here though, no place else. But they were, it was pretty colorful and wild. There she is, the Samuel Beckett Bridge. I couldn't wait. That was and it was getting darker and darker. And I'm like, oh God. And I kept saying, there's no lights. But anyway, so this is a bridge that was built in 2007, I think, 2007 to 2009. It's a cable bridge that's made to look like the national symbol of Ireland, which is obviously the harp. And it's just, I love it. And I love that building that's by it too. It's really cool. So I thought, well, I'm not going to take one shot on the bridge. You got to take a few, right? You got to try a few things. So this is some ICM. And this one is just the slow shutter with the cars because I wanted to get every single angle that I could, and this just one more. So I got my fill of the bridge. And then before I talk about this, I have to tell you my quick little story. So that night after we got the bridge, we got into the taxi and unbeknownst to me, my lens cap for my 24-105 popped off in the cab. So he took us back to the Harbor Bar and then I realized it, after he was gone. And I mean, you can get lens caps. I mean, it's cheap, right? But I was like, this was the first lens I ever had. And this was, so I was feeling a little sad. So the next day, the Airbnb owner, he messaged me and he said, there's a taxi driver who thinks it was you who left your lens cap in there. I said, it was me. So I said, what, can I get it or something? He said, no, don't worry about it. We'll work it out. So a little bit later in the afternoon, the knock on the door comes and he hands me my lens cap. And I said, how did you make this happen? Because we weren't driving anywhere. And he said, well, the taxi driver brought it to the Garda, which is the police station, which is around the corner. And they called me and I walked down there and I got it. And I said, it's a $12 lens cap. I'm like, so I mean, of course we had tipped the taxi driver, but he was long gone out of the situation. I couldn't get him any money. I said, can I give you anything? He said, no, that's just what we do. So Later on, having talked to people that have gone to Ireland, they all say the same thing, that Irish people are the nicest people. So I had now have a nice Irish person story. So this is the Howth Castle, only castle I saw, not a very great castle. So that's what I have to go back. I never did see a really great castle. So this is Howth Castle. It was nice, but it was small, kind of beaten up, a little ruggedy around the edges. And it was rainy. There's my husband's there. And that was it. Tried some ICM with the sailboats. This is Ireland's Eye. We didn't go out to that because it's too windy. Some construction, lots of construction on the way. Then this is our last meal at O'Connell's Bar. Probably the best meal we had, was just incredible. The food was incredible. One more of that. And so it was the last night before we left. And so I told Rick, I'm like, it's our last night. And it was a relatively clear sky. I'm like, I'm gonna stay out here, and he's, I don't want you to stay by yourself. And we got to catch the taxi. I'm like, I don't care. I'm staying out here. You can stay or you can go back to the place, because I'm staying out here. So anyway, this was the harbor. With the sailboats a little bit closer, one of the sailboats at sunset. Lots of light pollution. So try to do a few star trails. You can barely see them, because I was pushing my luck trying to stay out that late with them wanting to go in, but a little bit of star trails. So this is my last slide, because I want to know what you think that is. I mean, I know it's airplanes, because I've gotten airplanes before, at night. But what is the two things so close together, and they're different colors?
Is that not Starlink?
I don't know. Do you think that's what it is?
I think so, but I could be wrong.
But usually Starlink, isn't it just one? Why are there two? That's what I couldn't figure out. Do they, Michelle? That's what I couldn't decide. So jet streams coming out or lights coming. Yeah. Anyway. I did, yes. I did. Yeah, I took everything. Anyway, not that that's a cool picture. I really just wanted your opinion as to what is that? What is that? Anyway, the end. Thank you. I hope that wasn't too long. Thank you very much.
It was
I just
phenomenal.
wanna say that, I know a person who's leading a photo trip to Ireland in 2026, and castles are on the list, and so are dolmens and stone circles.